please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic?
Captain's log, supplemental. There's something oddly satisfying about revisiting those that get sent to the ISO cubes, especially when you know once they're released they will never have a career nor any respect from society ever again. So why did they even bother getting released? Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Where Are They Now? Today we're going to be revisiting somebody that I haven't covered since 2021. That's because they were in an ISO cube, because they were a part of a cult. A pyramid scheme, Ponzi scheme, money laundering, criminal enterprise, where they were one of the heads of it. Yet they got one of the most pathetic sentences because they got a plea bargain to throw the leader under the bus, although they were well and truly screwed anyway, to save their own ass. I am speaking of Allison Mack. I mentioned Allison Mack in a Halls of Injustice speaking of the NXIVM cult, and I will have to play the NXIVM cult Halls of Injustice on Keith Raniere because he was the head she is mentioned. Before I play clips from the Halls of Injustice I did specifically on Allison Mack, before we seek to then catch up with what she's been up to while locked up, and since she has been released, because yes, she is now one of the plebeians. We'll talk about that soon.
Well, yes, this one's quite interesting. It's called NXIVM, which can sound like a model number for one of the Star Trek ships. But it isn't. But it is pronounced NXIVM, which to me is quite interesting because I had thought it was a rather, dumb way of writing NXIVM. There is actually a group within it, a sororitas of sorts, called DOS, Dominus Obsequious Sororium. Now I had only heard of it because of an actress from Smallville called Allison Mack. Because I want to stay on track, perhaps it's right we discuss what NXIVM is. It describes itself as a multi-level marketing company that was based in Albany, New York. It claims to offer personal and professional development seminars through programs like Executive Success. As early as 2002, it has been described by many as a cult. NXIVM was founded by Keith Raniere, who prior to founding NXIVM had a company called Consumers Byline. In 1998, Raniere and Nancy Salzman founded NXIVM. Raniere had claimed that the program's main emphasis was to have people experience more joy in their lives. During the seminars, students were expected to call Raniere and Salzman Vanguard and Prefect. The title Vanguard came from Raniere's favourite arcade game. The organisation had claimed that one of the major reasons that the titles existed was because Raniere was the leader of a philosophical movement, and Salzman was his first student. The training that goes within NXIVM, though, is a trade secret, because all that join sign NDAs. But it had been reported there was a technique called rational inquiry to facilitate personal and professional development. In 2006, NXIVM got involved with Kristen Kruk, who in turn introduced them to Allison Mack. Now, Allison Mack bonded really well, and Kruk did at that time bond quite well as well, but she did go on to leave in 2013, and she was never featured in any of the trial cases because she just wasn't involved, something confirmed by almost everyone. Allison Mack, though, worked her way up to be second in command. She was considered an enthusiastic proselytizer, persuading her parents to take courses. She moved to Clifton Park, New York, near the home base in Albany. When people think of NXIVM, they think of three things: a pyramid scheme, a cult, and a sex trafficking operation. To combat some of the bad press, Keith decided to found the NXIVM-affiliated news organization, The Knife of Aristotle, but it was described as fake news, so it didn't go very far. In June 2017, Frank Parlato released a report on DOS. Earlier, I called it Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which is a secret sisterhood within NXIVM. The original allegation was that members were called slaves, branded with the initials of Raniere and Mack. subjected to corporal punishment from their masters, along with providing collateral to ensure they didn't break any of the rules. An early allegation was also that DOS members were forced into sexual slavery. This was corroborated by Sarah Edmondson, who had been an ESP participant since 2005. She left NXIVM after Mack inducted her into DOS, where she explained that participants were blindfolded naked and held down by Mack and other women, branded by the NXIVM-affiliated Dr. Danielle Roberts using a cauterizing pen. She explained this in great depth in a bunch of news magazines like 2020 and on a few documentaries on NXIVM, including the CBC podcast Uncover. In March 2018, Keith Raniere was arrested and indicted on charges related to DOS, which included sex trafficking conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit forced labour. On April 2018, Allison Mack was arrested and indicted on similar charges, along with her coercing people to engage in sexual activity with Raniere and performing menial tasks for which Raniere allegedly paid her. Allison Mack was the second in command. She had quite a number of responsibilities. Many of you will have heard of her, by the way, from TV shows like Smallville, and for the sake of it, she was in charge of the harem. Basically, all the women that were collected, branded because of the idea that came from Allison Mack's mouth to distinguish the women from other women, that gave themselves up willingly to Keith to deal with his thirst for the sex. And as I've mentioned Smallville, Tom Welling did in fact speak out about this, mostly to say,
NXIVM. Thank you, Rob.
Oh.
Yeah, with that thing. And when, fans are told, when we do Q&As, they're like, don't say a thing about it. And we never talk about it.
Well, it's easy for me. I didn't know anything about it. There you go. I was very surprised to read anything about it. It sounds very bizarre. Allison was always a nice person around me.
Yeah, supposedly one of the girls is coming out now. She pleaded guilty and she's going to tell all the truth, the whole big mess.
And so did the guy who played Lex Luthor on his podcast.
What's the deal on the set of Smallville, a show that used to be on with Allison Mack? Did he get the vibe or anything that she was into some freaky sex cult shit?
I haven't responded to this. It's funny because I've chosen not to talk about it only because it's shocking. And all I can say is this. When I was on that show, Allison was the sweetest, most professional. She was just a great girl, great actress. And, I remember, doing some self-help stuff.
So to start with the updates, we go through a number of blogs and articles that circulated concerning the responsibilities of Allison Mack, where she took over the management of the harem and made changes which included the DOS, dominant over submissive, or the vow. This was a ritual of branding slaves. Interestingly, Allison Mack herself, along with her now ex-wife, Nikki Klein, were not branded. Those that were a part of this collection of slaves were then blackmailed with pictures, videos, and confessions that were then used to control them. These converted a group of women into a stable of slaves, with Allison Mack acting as a slave master. There were allegations that she may well have compelled her female slaves to have sex with her, but that's not really been proven at this point. And it was reported that Allison Mack took great pleasure in controlling these people. So during her trial, Allison Mack pled guilty for her role in the sex slave cult. The charges were racketeering and racketeering conspiracy charges, which included extortion and forced labor. With Mack saying in the court, "I must take full responsibility for my conduct. I am very sorry for my role in this case. I am very sorry to my family and to the good people I hurt through my misguided adherence to Keith Raniere's teachings." At the time, Allison Mack faced 20 years in prison under the charges that she pleaded guilty to, which at the time, in 2017, Allison Mack married Nikki Klein. In December of 2020, divorce proceedings began. It was around this time that, because she was on bail, Allison Mack was seen out and about wearing ankle monitors. She also had claimed the reason she married Nikki Klein in the first place was not because she loved her, but because Keith Raniere told her to. For quite some time after this, the whole story went a little quiet, and the reason why was because, honestly, beyond getting pictures of her seen out and about in public, wearing an ankle monitor, nothing was really happening until last week, where Allison Mack decided to make a final statement as it were, with regards to what she had done, courtesy of a letter, where she said, "I threw myself into the teachings of Keith Raniere with everything I had. I believed wholeheartedly that his mentorship was leading me to be a better, more enlightened version of myself. I devoted my loyalty, my resources, and ultimately my life to him. This was the biggest mistake and regret of my life. I'm sure your ex-wife agrees with this sentiment wholeheartedly." It was around the time of the release of this letter that things started to look a little sus. Even her lawyers believed that she would receive no jail time, not only because of a guilty plea, but because of something else. She had in fact cooperated with the investigation, eventually. Add to that she had in fact started publicly denouncing Raniere and NXIVM along with her regret. So as she pled guilty, we get to the sentence. Allison Mack, weeping tears in court, received a mighty, lofty sentence, which under advisory sentence guidelines should be between 14 and 17.5 years, on the charges of racketeering and racketeering conspiracy, 3 years.
So that, with a lot of dead air because I don't truncate very well, should provide ample context as to who Allison Mack is and her involvement within the NXIVM cult. I did not support her getting such a short sentence regardless of the plea deal, because Keith Raniere was already going down, so her giving any information over meant sod all really. They just wanted to be certain he'd never leave a prison alive. Allison Mack's involvement within the NXIVM cult, regardless of her finally deciding to speak out against it after she had pled guilty, meant sod all to me. Whether her marriage was one out of convenience again meant very little to me. What mattered to me was that she was given a sentence fitting for somebody who was held in such a high position, like the Bronfman sisters, who were also given rather meek sentences. This is why many people who make content like I do within the crime sphere firmly believe that there is a sentencing gap when it comes to female convicts. This is proof of it. So what we're going to do now is go through a few updates that should be included in this video. We're going to start by talking about Nikki Klein. Nikki Klein is the ex-wife of Allison Mack. She was also a member of the cult. In December of 2022, Nikki Klein defended Keith Raniere, insisting that he is a kind person. Contrary to what most people might believe, Keith is a very joyful and kind and humorous person. That was in a Page 6 exclusive interview. Continuing by saying, "I miss just being able to have conversations with him about life, about philosophy, about deeper existential issues, of why we're here. I really always valued his opinions and thoughts on things. I just think he's a very misunderstood person. Certainly my purpose here is not to get people to like Keith, I want justice, but there's a lot of things I miss about Keith, about the community and all the people who are involved." On her website, she went on to put out another statement concerning criminal justice and prison reform. But where I want to go is March 27th, 2023. "I have changed my position on Keith Raniere. I no longer believe he is a man of noble character as I once did. I also do not believe he considered my best interests or helped me achieve the goals for which I sought his guidance." In a lengthy statement, she absolutely shames the crap out of Keith, slams him for failing, for misleading, and for being quite clearly corrupt. She also has had to deal with a civil lawsuit, but because I believe she had no actual assets, if she is fined anything for that civil lawsuit, at best she can give him a 2011 Subaru. As she's the ex-wife of Allison Mack, it's right to point out what she's been up to as well. She's very active on Twitter and Instagram. Now let's talk about Allison. We're going to go back to December 2022 and continue from there. On the 29th of December 2022, Esquire put out an article titled "Allison Mack joined NXIVM to become a great actress again." I feel like we can spin this to the MAGA of "Make Allison Great Again," but in this context it would be one of the few times where MAGA could be interpreted as wrong. Now the article itself had been updated a few times. It had been updated on June 30th, 2021, where it indicates that sentencing guidelines called for a sentence of 14 to 17 years. 3 years in prison she got, with 3 years supervised release and a fine of $20,000. No doubt her parents paid for that. The update for the 29th of December, a year and a half into her sentence, new information was still emerging about Allison Mack's role in the cult. In an episode of the podcast Infamous, Inside America's Biggest Scandals, journalist Vanessa Grigoriadis unearthed an interview with Mack in which she revealed why she joined. Quote, "I moved to Albany to fill that emptiness and find the soul of myself again, if that makes sense, as it had fizzled. I asked Keith if he would help me become a great actress again, because I felt like I was a fraud." She also denied any wrongdoing, saying that Ranier was not the head of a harem, and told Vanessa, "I'm not recruiting young nubile women to be his slaves. You know, it's the Crucible, it's the McCarthy trial. It's just throwing accusations and spreading like wildfire. Understanding one's motivations are vitally important to grasping the full scope of the situation." And so I'll link that podcast down below if you're interested. Personally, I think Allison got a bit full of herself, believing that she should be somewhere at the top still. Many people star in shows for a length of time, and rarely do they manage to do it again. So they take on other roles, whether that be stage related, musicals of course, or whether they seek to get backing roles, rebuild, rebrand. It is quite common with many people in occupations that are quite risky, and acting is certainly one of them. Just because you've been in a hit show does not mean you are entitled to continue at the top. Seeking help to get better or to go further, I can understand. But considering what Allison is known to have done, this is quite clearly a massive distraction from the reality. She was a bully, pure and simple. So now we understand that she wanted to be a great actress again, which confuses me because I believe she was a good actress, sure. Even her fellow castmates from Smallville agree she was a great actress in the context of that show. Let's now skip ahead to the 5th of July 2023. On the 5th of July 2023, courtesy of the New York Post, Allison Mack had been spotted for the very first time since her release from federal prison for her involvement in the NXIVM cult. She had moved in with her parents in LA. Many articles have covered what she's been wearing, don't really care too much. But the one thing we do know is that she is on 3 years supervised release, which means she is wearing an ankle monitor. However, something quite interesting is, while she had been wearing an ankle monitor, she's also as early as August of 2023 been noticed to be not wearing her ankle monitor, which then does bring into question the nature of her release, because from what we all knew, this was going to be a part of the condition. So whereas initially I didn't really care what she was wearing, you then see her in multiple outfits showing her ankles, and there is no bracelet on it, no monitor of any kind. So her 3-year on license sentence part seems a bit redundant, or had seemed considering it was mentioned when she was first sentenced that she would be wearing one. She was released from prison early because of her good behaviour. That much is known. In 2021, she had written a letter addressed to those harmed by her actions, and this was also considered a rehabilitation moment situation type deal. And while she didn't testify against Ranier, because that would obviously cause her distress, she led to his absolute downfall, and that's why she also was considered rehabilitated to an extent. A former member of the cult, Sarah Edmondson, survivor in fact, also wrote a book about her experiences on this, wishes Allison Mack nothing but the best, so that she and her family can get well on their healing journey. And that's a very positive position to take because you want to give someone another chance at life. I'm not one of those people in this context. On the 2nd of August 2023, the Los Angeles Magazine reviewed her sentencing transcript and found details about her time as a master and her reconciliation with her family. There were 10 key points, and I thought we'd go through those. 1. Allison Mack plotted with Keith Ranier to create the branding process, with Allison Mack being asked, "Do you think the person who's been branded should be completely nude and sort of held to the table almost like a sacrifice?" Allison Mack replied, "Yes." You notice why I don't care for a healing part now? Ranier continued that the person should be asked to be branded and the brand should be an honour, so that it doesn't seem like they are being coerced. 2. One of her victims implored a judge to be hard on Mack, saying, "Allison Mack is a predator and an evil human being who weaponized the woman's history of sexual that word by grooming me into becoming a sex slave for her beloved Keith Ranier." Why is there an I in that? I thought his name ended with E. 3. Mack has been repeatedly called the Ghislaine Maxwell to Keith's Epstein. Well, that's dark. 4. Allison Mack left home at 15 to film Smallville in Vancouver and slowly became estranged from her family, with them later reconciling, hence why she moved in with them after her release. 5. Allison Mack thanked her victims for crushing NXIVM, saying in front of the sentencing judges, One of the thoughts I find most terrifying is where I would be now if we had not been stopped. 6. Allison Mack led a pretty and privileged life, says one of the victims, Jane Doe number 8. Quote, she can blame Keith all she wants, but she is a monster cut from the same cloth. 7. Allison Mack made a victim seduce Keith and have him take a naked picture as proof that the Jane Doe did it. 8. Under house arrest, Allison Mack was enjoying the Orange County sunshine and sipping lattes and putting on lip gloss with her friends as her victims, a Jane Doe told a judge, we were left hiding in the dark corners of their homes, reliving the fear, silence and horror that Allison put us through. 9. Allison Mack is pursuing a graduate degree from the University of Berkeley. And 10. Allison Mack served 1,000 hours of community service, paid a $20,000 fine to the court. Court records indicate her passport had been returned to her and 2 homes worth $2 million she put up as bail are now back in her full possession. I'm intrigued that she wanted to make herself great again as an actress. But to be honest, $2 million goes far. You could just sell those and, I don't know, live at your parents for a bit. Which I guess does now answer fully where she is now. As far as her future goes, I'm intrigued to know what you guys think, whether you think Allison Mack, having done 2 years of a 3-year sentence, with 3 years on license without an ankle monitor, even though that was meant to be, when she should have been doing 14 to 17 years for her involvement, because she flipped on Keith Renier even though he was doomed from the offset, whether this means she is entitled, or should be entitled, to a future within the plebeian communities, us, the lowly oikaru, or whether she should try to make herself great again.
I just remember, I'm not being, I'm not blowing this out of proportion. I'm not exaggerating at all. I remember, because my friend Ethan was here, and I remember we just kind of go, and I didn't, by the way, I didn't even know about this next team or anything at this point. I mean, I remember on set once she came and she's like, hey, you should take this class. It's really cool and blah, blah. And I remember I said to Tom, sounds like a cult. I don't know.